Some people win the lottery. Others, like my wife, just think they did. It started with a gut feeling. You know that sensation, like something's just off, like the air in your own house is different. She was smiling too much. Not the kind of smile that comes from happiness, but the forced kind, like she was overcompensating. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't the paranoid type. But then came the little things, the sudden phone password change, the way she started dressing up more just to run errands, the extra care in her makeup even when she was just going to see her mom. And then the biggest one, her attitude toward me. I wasn't suddenly a bad husband. No, I was still the same man who worked hard, provided, and treated her well. But she had changed. Detached, yet oddly patient. Like she was waiting for something. I didn't act on suspicion alone. That's what weak men do, confront without proof, let emotions take over. No, I observed. I listened. I pieced it together. Then, one evening, my opportunity came. She was in the shower, her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Normally, she guarded that thing like a dragon with treasure. But she must have been comfortable or cocky, or both. I picked it up, screen still lit. The name flashing? Babe Red Heart. I unlocked it easily. She had used my birth year as her password. Irony at its finest. And there it was. The evidence, in black and white. Texts, photos, plans. Talks of when she would finally leave me, how much she hated pretending. The affair wasn't new. It was at least 6 months deep. 6 months of my wife playing the loving partner while sneaking around with some guy. Some pathetic, overly romantic, emoji-abusing fool who thought he had won the jackpot by stealing another man's wife. I didn't feel rage. Not the hot kind, anyway. What I felt was cold. Pure, calculating cold. This wasn't just betrayal, it was arrogance. She thought she was smart. She thought I was blind. She was playing a game she thought she had already won. And that's what made it perfect. Because the best revenge isn't about anger. It's about making them believe they're winning right up until they lose everything. I put her phone back exactly as I found it. No confrontation. No accusations. Just a decision. A plan. That night, I kissed her goodnight like I always did. Looked her in the eyes, smiled. Watched as she drifted off to sleep, completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. Because, you see, if my wife wanted to leave me for a better life, I was going to give her one. A dream so perfect she'd throw everything away for it. And then, just when she thought she had secured her future, I'd pull the ground right out from under her. I was about to become the best thing that ever happened to her, and the worst mistake she ever made. I used to think I had it all. Not in the flashy, billionaire, jet-setting kind of way, but in the way that actually matters. Stability. Love. A home that felt like a sanctuary, where I could close the door at the end of the day and breathe easy. My life was built on simple, solid things, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, the occasional spontaneous date night, lazy Sunday afternoon spent binge-watching shows we never finished. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Or so I thought. We had a rhythm, my wife and I. A life made up of small rituals that, in hindsight, feel like the setup to a cruel joke. I woke up early, always before her. She hated mornings, so I let her sleep while I made coffee, checked emails, and read the news. By the time she dragged herself out of bed, I'd have her coffee ready, just the way she liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. She always said she'd quit sugar one day. I used to joke that I'd believe it when I saw it. Now, I wonder if she said the same thing about quitting me. Workdays were predictable. I'd leave before her, kissing her on the forehead as she half mumbled, half snored some barely coherent goodbye. I'd head to the office, put in my hours, come home to dinner, sometimes homemade, sometimes takeout when she wasn't in the mood to cook. We'd eat together, talk about our days, complain about work, laugh at dumb videos on our phones. And then, at night, we'd fall asleep in the same bed, her curled up next to me, her breathing slowing as she drifted off. There were little things, though. Signs that, at the time, seemed insignificant. Like the way she had started checking her phone more often, angling the screen away from me just slightly. Or how she had gotten into the habit of keeping her ringer off, claiming she just preferred it that way now. She started dressing up a little more, even for casual things, fixing her hair just to go grocery shopping, reapplying lipstick before heading out to see a friend. But I never questioned it. I had never been the jealous type. Trust was something I had always given freely, and I thought she did the same. Looking back, I realize now how easy it is to lie to yourself when you want to believe in something. How the brain smooths over inconsistencies, convinces you that you're just imagining things. There were nights when she would go out and come back just a little too happy, a little too flushed. She'd say it was wine with the girls, but she never smelled like wine. More like mint gum and perfume, the kind that isn't meant to be worn for someone, but because of someone. The kind that lingers too long. But the real kicker? The moment that should have set off every alarm in my head? It was the way she had started looking at me differently. Not with hate, not even with guilt, something worse. Indifference. Like I had become just another piece of furniture in her life, something she walked past every day without really noticing. She still kissed me, still told me she loved me, but there was something mechanical about it. Like she was saying it because she was supposed to, not because she felt it. And still, I ignored it. Because, at the time, I was happy. And when you're happy, you don't go looking for cracks in the foundation. You trust that the ground beneath you is solid, until the moment it caves in. It was a Tuesday, one of those painfully ordinary days where nothing significant is supposed to happen. I had just gotten home from work, loosened my tie, and tossed my keys onto the counter like I always did. The house smelled like lavender and something else, something artificial, like the sharp sweetness of a perfume I didn't recognize. My wife was in the kitchen, humming softly, a glass of wine in hand. She looked up at me and smiled too quickly, too practiced. "You're home early," she said, glancing at the clock. It was 6:30. Not early, not late, just like every other day. Something in the way she said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she noticed the time. As if it mattered. As if she had been counting the minutes. "Yeah," I said, casually. "Traffic was light." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. She was watching me, assessing, calculating, like she was trying to figure out if I had noticed something I wasn't supposed to. I looked around. Everything in the house was in its usual place. The couch pillows arranged neatly, the dining table clean, nothing out of order. And yet, something felt off. It wasn't tangible, not yet, but it was there. A shift in the air. Then I noticed her phone. Face down. Screen dark. She had never been the type to be glued to it, but she also never used to be so careful. I walked over to the counter and grabbed a glass, pouring myself a drink while keeping her in my periphery. Her fingers twitched slightly, barely perceptible. A nervous reflex. "How was your day?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She exhaled, almost relieved, like she had expected a different question. "Same as always. Work was a nightmare, as usual." She rolled her eyes, took a sip of her wine. "And you?" I watched her for a moment before answering. "Nothing special." She nodded, taking another sip, but her eyes flickered toward her phone, just for a second. Quick. Almost imperceptible. If I hadn't been watching, I wouldn't have caught it. That was the first sign. The second came minutes later, when her phone, still face down, buzzed. Not a single buzz, a double vibration. A message. Her body stiffened just slightly. She took another sip of wine, too casually, and reached for the phone like it was no big deal. But instead of picking it up, she silenced it, screen still hidden from view, then turned to me with a forced smile. "What do you want to do for dinner?" she asked, too brightly. I leaned against the counter, swirling the liquid in my glass. "Who was that?" Her smile didn't falter, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. "Huh. The message." I nodded toward her phone. "Who texted?" For the smallest fraction of a second, there was something in her eyes. A flicker of hesitation. Barely there, but enough. "Oh, just Sarah," she said, too quickly. "She's having drama with her boyfriend again." Sarah. The best friend she rarely spoke to anymore. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Just took a slow sip of my drink and let the silence stretch. I wanted to see what she'd do with it. Sure enough, she filled the space. "She's always so dramatic," she continued, waving a hand. "Honestly, it's exhausting." I nodded, setting my glass down. "Yeah? You should tell her to dump him." "I have," she said, laughing a little too hard, like she was relieved to be talking about anything else. And that was the third sign. Not the message itself. Not even the lie about Sarah. But the performance. The way she suddenly needed to prove she was unbothered. The way she had jumped so eagerly into making the conversation about someone else. I didn't press. Not yet. Pressing would make her careful. And I wanted her comfortable. So I let it go. For now. Trust is a fragile thing. Once a crack appears, no matter how small, it will never be the same. I no longer believed in coincidences. There were too many little things that didn't add up. The phone she always kept face down. The lie about the message from her friend. The tension in her voice when I asked simple questions. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a chess match, and I had just realized my opponent had been playing against me all along. But for now, she still thought she was winning. That was my advantage. I started watching more closely. I didn't ask direct questions, didn't confront her. That's what emotional men do when they want to vent, not when they want the truth. Instead, I waited. I analyzed. I checked her words against her actions. And every time, I found something that didn't fit. She said she was at the gym, but she didn't take her workout clothes. She claimed she spent the evening at a friend's place, but couldn't recall a single detail of their conversation. Phone calls became less frequent, yet there were moments when she would step out of the room whenever she received a message. Then came the night that confirmed everything. I came home a little later than usual. Not on purpose, just a meeting that ran long. But when I walked into the house, something felt off. I couldn't place it at first. Nothing was out of order, no obvious signs of anything being different. But the air itself felt changed. Then it hit me, the scent. Faint but undeniable. A trace of cologne. Not mine. Someone else's. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to trigger something deep in my instincts. I didn't say anything, didn't react. I just greeted her like I always did and went to take a shower. But I didn't turn the water on right away. I listened. A minute later, I heard her walk to the bedroom door and quietly, carefully check the lock. That was the moment I knew I no longer needed suspicions. I needed proof. The next day, I took time off work and started my own investigation. First, I checked her phone while she was asleep. The password was changed. For the first time in years. That was a bad sign for her, but a good one for me. It meant there was something she was actively hiding. Then, I checked her laptop. The browser history had been wiped clean for the past few weeks. A perfect digital footprint, which only meant one thing: she had something to erase. But the biggest piece of evidence came from her car. I waited until she was in the shower, took her keys, and opened the glove compartment. There was only one item inside, but it was all I needed. A receipt from a restaurant, dated 3 nights ago. 2 entrees, an expensive bottle of wine. And the signature at the bottom? Not hers. A man's. I placed everything back exactly as I found it, and did the only thing that felt right at that moment. I smiled. Because now, I didn't have to wonder. Now, I knew for sure. And now, this wasn't her game anymore. It was mine. Every man has a moment in his life when everything changes in an instant. When the illusion he once held onto shatters, leaving nothing but cold clarity behind. For me, that moment came on a Saturday night. Funny thing, I hadn't planned to find out the full truth that night. I had told myself to be patient, to keep gathering the pieces until the entire picture became clear. But the truth has a way of revealing itself to those who are willing to see it. She told me she was going to a friend's place. I nodded like I always did, even helped her fasten the bracelet around her wrist, the same bracelet I had bought her as a gift. She kissed me on the cheek, mechanical, thoughtless, like muscle memory. I told her, have fun. And she walked out the door. No hesitation. No second glance. I waited 5 minutes. Then I got into my car and followed her. You know, there are moments where you hope you're wrong. Even when you already know the answer, part of you clings to that last shred of hope. But deep down, I had already accepted what I was about to see. Her car was parked outside a hotel. Not a fancy one. Not a restaurant. Not even a bar. A cheap, tasteless hotel, the kind where people go when they think no one will ever find out. And that's when everything made sense. The receipt from the restaurant, the changed passwords, the cautious glances, the unnecessary lies. She hadn't even been careful. She had just assumed I'd never notice. I parked a distance away and waited. I didn't have to wait long. 30 minutes later, they walked out. Her. And him. I don't know what I expected him to look like. In my head, I thought he would be someone better than me, someone with more to offer. Otherwise, well, what would be the point? But when I saw him, I almost laughed. He was average. No impressive physique. No wealthy businessman aura. Just a guy. A forgettable, mediocre man who carried himself like he had just won the lottery. My wife laughed at something he said. He had his hand on her waist like she belonged to him. She didn't even look over her shoulder. They got into his car and drove away. And as I sat there watching, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartache. I felt calm. Because this wasn't an ending. This was the beginning. She thought she had one. She thought I had no idea. She thought she was safe. But now, I had everything I needed. and I was about to ruin her world. Revenge isn't about anger. It's not about shouting, breaking things, or letting emotions take control. That's what weak men do. They react. But power doesn't come from reaction, it comes from calculation. And I had plenty of time to calculate. Sitting in my car that night, watching my wife disappear into the distance with another man, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. No more second-guessing. No more wondering if I was imagining things. I had everything I needed. Now, the only question was how to strike. And not just in any way, no, this needed to be perfect. Destroying her wasn't the goal. That would be too easy. Too predictable. If I confronted her now, she'd cry, lie, gaslight, maybe even try to flip the script. But if I wanted real satisfaction, I had to let her think she was still in control. Let her dig her own grave without even realizing it. Let her celebrate before I took everything away. So I started thinking about what mattered most to her. She wasn't some gold digger looking for a wealthy escape. No, her weakness was different: status, comfort, and the illusion of winning. She loved to feel superior. Loved to think she had the upper hand. She probably believed she was already steps ahead of me, secretly planning how she'd leave at the perfect moment, making sure I'd be too broken to stand up for myself. That's why the first step in my plan was simple: make her believe she was winning. The next morning, I was the perfect husband. I greeted her with a smile, made her coffee just the way she liked it, kissed her forehead before heading out. She didn't expect that. She was expecting tension, suspicion, maybe even a passive-aggressive comment. But I gave her nothing. That day at work, I started the real preparation. First, I moved my money. Every shared account, every asset that had her name anywhere near it, I rerouted it all to places she couldn't touch. Legally, of course. I wasn't reckless. I just ensured that when the time came, she'd walk away with nothing but regret. Then, I planted the first seed. She had been talking for months about a big promotion at work. A high-profile position that would boost her career, her image, everything she cared about. She was convinced she had it in the bag. After all, her boss adored her, she made sure of that. And that was her fatal mistake. Because while she had spent time sneaking around behind my back, she hadn't realized just how much I knew about her boss. See, one advantage of being the quiet, observant type is that people underestimate you. Her boss? A married man. And I had proof of his own extracurricular activities. Things that would make his professional life very uncomfortable if they ever came to light. I didn't even have to use threats. I just suggested an alternative candidate for the position, someone he wouldn't want to cross. And just like that, her perfect promotion slipped through her fingers before she even knew what happened. That was step one. Step two? Give her a reason to leave me first. I started planting little doubts in her mind. Staying out late without explanation, being just slightly distant, leaving my phone unlocked with vague messages from a new friend she had never heard of. It didn't take long before she started acting paranoid. She wasn't used to being on the receiving end of suspicion. And that's exactly where I wanted her. Then, I made my final move, the fake lottery ticket. I staged it perfectly. Left a fake winning slip casually forgotten on my desk, a believable printout showing millions in winnings. Just enough for her to see it and panic. She saw freedom. Saw her escape plan falling perfectly into place. Within 2 weeks, she started acting even sweeter, suddenly talking about vacations, about us finally enjoying life more. She was desperate to secure her position before she made her exit. And that's when I let her make her choice. She packed her bags one evening while I was out. Left a note. Some nonsense about needing to find herself, how she hoped we could remain friends, how she'd always cherish what we had. Fake, manipulative, cowardly. I waited exactly 1 day before delivering my masterpiece. I made sure she got the news through mutual friends, through whispers, through the very people she was trying to impress. The lottery? Never real. The money she thought she could secure? Didn't exist. And as the final touch, the moment she reached out, whether out of anger, confusion, or sheer desperation, I sent her one message. Some people win the lottery. Others just think they did. She had gambled everything. And lost. I had spent weeks setting the stage, ensuring every move felt natural, every shift in behavior subtle enough that she never suspected the truth. She thought she was leaving me on her terms, with her dignity intact, stepping into a better future. But what she didn't realize was that I had been pulling the strings the entire time. And now, the final act was ready. She had left me for what she thought was an upgrade. A man who, from what I had already gathered, had no intention of actually keeping her once the excitement wore off. But that wasn't my problem. My concern was making sure that when she realized her mistake, she had nothing to fall back on. That's why I had waited until she felt comfortable, until she truly believed she had escaped cleanly. Then I struck. The first domino fell when she went to check her financial situation. While she was living in fantasy mode, preparing for a luxurious new chapter, I had made sure that every shared asset we had was legally and securely moved out of her reach. She had expected a safety net. Instead, she found nothing. Then came her job disaster. She had been so sure that her big promotion was hers. She had even started spending money she didn't have, confident that a bigger paycheck was coming. But instead of celebrating her new position, she got an abrupt email she had been passed over. She had no idea why. But I did. And the best part? She still had no clue I was behind it all. The final blow had to be public. Something that would rip away her illusion of control in front of an audience that mattered to her. And there was no better setting than our mutual friend's engagement party, an event filled with people she desperately wanted to impress. She wouldn't dare miss it. I arrived early, dressed sharp, carrying the perfect prop, a bottle of expensive champagne, something that subtly screamed success, happiness, moving on. When she walked in, I saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to be so at ease. She had likely imagined me crushed, pathetic, maybe even desperate to talk. Instead, I was the calmest man in the room. She approached cautiously, forced a smile. "Hey." I let a pause linger, then smiled back. "Hey, you're looking well." That threw her off. She blinked, unsure of how to proceed. She had expected anger, maybe sarcasm. But politeness? That unsettled her. Then, just as she was about to speak, I turned away first, not giving her the chance to control the conversation. I greeted friends, laughed, made sure everyone saw me thriving. She hovered, watching, trying to understand. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Someone, one of our mutual friends, who had no idea what I had orchestrated, asked her about her promotion. The one she had already bragged about in advance, assuming it was a done deal. Her smile faltered just slightly. "Oh, actually, it didn't work out." "Really? I thought you were a lock for that position." And there it was, the first crack in her carefully constructed image. She tried to brush it off, but the embarrassment was visible. She hated looking like she had lost. Then, I dropped the final bombshell. With perfect timing, I pulled out my phone and, as if just remembering, said, "Oh, speaking of good news, I wanted to share something with everyone." The room quieted slightly, and I tapped my screen. The TV on the wall, linked to my phone, lit up with a screenshot. Her note. The one she left me when she walked out. Everyone saw it. The carefully chosen words she had used to paint herself as the one taking the high road, to make it seem like she was the mature one, the victim who had to leave for her own good. And right underneath it? My one-line reply to her message. The one I had sent after she realized the lottery was fake. Some people win the lottery. Others just think they did. A few guests gasped. Others exchanged looks. A murmur spread across the room. She turned white. She spun toward me, eyes wide. "What the heck is this?" I tilted my head, playing dumb. "Oh, I thought everyone already knew. Didn't you tell them how things ended?" Silence. That was the moment she realized. I had flipped the narrative. She was supposed to be the one who moved on from me. The one who left for something better. But now? Now everyone in this room saw the truth, that she had walked away thinking she was securing her future, only to be left with nothing. She opened her mouth, probably to try and lie her way out. But before she could, someone from the crowd muttered, "Wow, that's rough." Another guest let out a low whistle. Whispers. Side glances. Judgments. She turned to me, fury in her eyes. "You set me up." I didn't blink. Didn't react. Just smiled. "Me? No, sweetheart. You did that all on your own." Then, I raised my glass. To new beginnings. And as the room erupted in murmurs, as she stood there, humiliated, with no excuse, no escape, no way to fix what had just happened, I turned my back and walked away. Game over. The silence after my toast hung in the air like a slow-burning fuse. Every second that passed, more eyes turned toward her, more whispers started spreading through the room. She stood frozen, her face shifting between pale shock and the desperate attempt to mask it. She had spent so much time crafting an illusion, the perfect image of the woman who had moved on, who had left her marriage on her own terms, who had stepped into something better. And in less than a minute, I had ripped it all away. Her hands trembled as she set her drink down, probably realizing that every movement was being watched. She wanted to speak, to reclaim control of the situation, but what could she say? The proof was right there, on the screen. The note she left me, her carefully chosen words about finding herself, about how she hoped we could remain friends. And beneath it, my simple, cutting reply, evidence that I had seen through her from the very start. She swallowed hard, eyes darting around, trying to measure how much damage had been done. Someone near the back let out a low chuckle. Someone else whispered something to a friend, shaking their head. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was exposed. Finally, she found her voice. This is out of context, she stammered, her voice just a little too high, a little too unsteady. You're twisting things, making it seem like. I tilted my head slightly, giving her the space to keep talking, to dig herself deeper. The more she struggled, the more obvious it became that she had no way out. I folded my arms, watching her unravel with quiet amusement. I'm twisting things? I repeated, letting the question hang. Tell me, what exactly am I twisting? Your own words? The way you left. She opened her mouth, closed it again. The weight of the stairs pressing in on her. She knew she had no good answer. Someone near the side of the room muttered, "Wow, she really thought she was slick." Another guest let out a small, disbelieving laugh. That's when the panic set in. She took a sharp breath, trying to recover, trying to regain control of the moment. Look, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but this isn't fair. This is cruel. That word. Cruel. I let it settle, let everyone in the room absorb the irony of it. She had spent months lying to me, betraying me, carefully orchestrating her escape for something she thought was a better deal. And now, when faced with the consequences of her own actions, suddenly she wanted to play the victim. I took a slow sip of my drink before setting it down, then met her gaze with calm, deliberate precision. Cruel. I repeated. No. This is clarity. Her lower lip trembled, barely noticeable, but I caught it. She wasn't used to this, being the one on the defensive, the one being judged. She had always controlled the story, dictated the narrative. And now, she had lost that power entirely. She turned to the crowd, desperate for someone, anyone to come to her defense. But nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to attach themselves to a sinking ship. Her breath came quicker now, her eyes darting wildly. It's not what you think. He's trying to make me look bad because he's bitter. That earned a scoff from someone behind me. I raised an eyebrow, playing along. Bitter. I mused. That's an interesting choice of words. If I were bitter, wouldn't I be the one clinging to the past? Wouldn't I be the one regretting my decisions? I let the last words sink in, then glanced at the screen again, at the evidence that had started this whole scene. Tell me, do I seem like the one who lost here? Her breathing was uneven now. The panic was full-blown. She turned toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, she said, just for me to hear. We don't have to do this here. I smiled slightly. You're right. Then I turned toward the bartender. Can I get a refill? That simple action, turning my back on her, was what finally broke her. Because that's when she realized. There was no saving this moment. No excuse she could spin. No quick fix. I had stripped her of her illusion, left her with nothing. She turned and hurried toward the exit, her steps quick and unsteady. As she passed, I caught a glimpse of her expression, humiliation. Pure, undeniable, suffocating humiliation. I let out a slow breath as she disappeared through the door. And then, just as I expected, the energy in the room shifted. Laughter. The whispers turned into full conversations, the tension lifting as the spectacle faded. I picked up my drink, took a sip, and smiled. She thought she was winning. She thought she was untouchable. But tonight, she learned the truth. Some people win the lottery. Others just think they did. The aftermath was everything I had predicted, everything I had planned. She thought she could control the situation, manipulate the narrative, slip away into a comfortable new life without consequences. But the truth about people like her is simple. They never prepare for the fallout. They never consider what happens after the lie collapses. And when it does, they're left standing in the wreckage, wondering how it all went so wrong. She tried, at first, to damage control, to spin the story. She reached out to a few mutual friends, hoping to salvage her reputation. But people talk. And after what happened at the engagement party, the damage was irreversible. Nobody wanted to be the one defending the woman who thought she was playing the perfect game, only to be exposed as the fraud she was. Some people offered her forced sympathy, a nod of acknowledgement, a few empty words. but no one was really on her side. And she felt it. Her career took a hit next. Losing the promotion wasn't just about missing out on a title, it was about losing momentum. She had built her entire professional image on being ahead, being admired, being the woman who always had something better lined up. But once the promotion slipped through her fingers, she wasn't the next rising star anymore. She was just another employee, one whose reputation was quietly tarnished by whispers. People don't invest in uncertainty. And she had become exactly that. Then came her personal life, or what was left of it. She had left me, thinking she was stepping into a dream. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares when built on betrayal. I didn't have to do anything. Her own choices handled the destruction for me. The man she had risked everything for? He wasn't interested in baggage. She had been a secret, a thrill, nothing more. And once the excitement wore off, once she became available, once she started needing more from him, he did exactly what I expected. He walked away. No commitment. No happy ending. Just silence. And that's when it truly hit her. She didn't just lose me. She lost everything that came with me. The stability, the comfort, the respect. She had thought I would be broken, that I would be the one struggling after she left. Instead, I was thriving. My career was strong. My finances were untouched. My social life? Better than ever. And her? She was the one scrambling. She reached out, eventually. A message, short and hesitant. Something that, if you weren't paying attention, might have seemed harmless. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at the screen for a long moment, amused. She wasn't really checking on me. She was testing the waters, seeing if there was still a way back, if I was still an option. I didn't respond. A few days later, another message. This time, longer. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for how things ended. I never meant to hurt you. I hope one day you can forgive me. Forgive? She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for relief from the guilt. She wanted to believe that she hadn't lost everything, that at least, in some small way, she could still control the damage. I left that message unread, too. Weeks passed, and then, the final attempt. I miss talking to you. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk. That one made me laugh. Not because it was surprising. Because it was pathetic. She had spent so much time believing she was the one making the decisions, the one calling the shots. But now, she had no moves left. And the only thing she could do was try to cling to the one person who had actually valued her, the one person she had betrayed. That was the difference between us. She played short games, chasing immediate gratification, never thinking beyond the next step. I played the long game. And in the end, I was the one still standing. Still moving forward. Still winning. While she was nothing more than a lesson she never expected to learn. Game over. She thought she had me figured out. She thought I'd be the one left grieving, questioning where it all went wrong, wondering if I could have done something different. But the truth is, I never had to chase revenge. It came to me naturally, through the weight of her own choices. She walked away believing she had won, believing she had secured a better future, believing she would never have to face the consequences. And yet, here we are. I thrived. She crumbled. I never answered her last message. I never gave her the relief she was looking for, never gave her a chance to feel like she could redeem herself. Because some things don't deserve redemption. Some betrayals don't get neatly tied up apologies or second chances. She wasn't sorry for what she did, she was sorry she lost. And that's the only thing that ever mattered to her. She didn't regret breaking my trust. She regretted not getting away with it. People like her? They don't change. They just learn to fear consequences. And I made sure that lesson stayed with her forever. Now, I live my life without her shadow over me. I don't wonder what could have been, because I already know. If I had stayed blind, if I had let her win, I'd be the one drowning in regret. Instead, I'm here, stronger than ever, free of someone who never deserved me in the first place. And she's stuck in the wreckage she created, left with the realization that she threw away the best thing she ever had for an illusion that disappeared the moment she touched it. So now, I ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have walked away without a fight? Would you have let her get away with it, let her rewrite the story? Or would you have made sure she learned a lesson she'd never forget? Let me know, what would you have done?